Merry Christmas everyone, it's Ozzy from OzTalksHW, and this guy right here is a $300 entry-level gaming computer using only brand new components. So on my channel, I have a lot of videos that prove the theory that you can build an entry-level $300 gaming computer if you utilize the used market. Generally speaking, the formula is you pick up a pre-built computer, you upgrade the power supply, and then you buy a dedicated video card, and then you have a pretty solid gaming computer for 300 bucks or less. And again, I have a lot of videos proving this theory. Even if you don't use a pre-built computer, you can still squeeze out a $300-ish gaming computer if you pick out all of your components from the used market. Now, the issue is that a lot of people, especially first-time builders, aren't comfortable using the used market. They would much rather get new components that have warranties on them and that they can return whenever they like. So I decided to pick out an alternative, a $300 gaming computer, entry-level gaming computer that's using only brand new components. And well, this is the concoction that came out of me trying to build a brand new gaming computer for only $300. Now, before I get into the parts and the rest of the video, let me preface this by saying that this is a standard cookie cutter build, meaning that I didn't really deal hunt all that much because I wanted to make this as applicable to as many people as possible. So I try to stay with MSRP prices or prices that are common to the current market state. But if you have any deals on hand, use them. As always, use as many deals as you can. You'd want to try and get this computer as cheap as possible, or you want to fit as much performance into this computer as possible, because at 300 bucks, there's not much you can work with, so squeeze out as much as you can. Let's start off with the CPU. I decided to go with the Pentium G4600. The G4560 also works here, but it just so happens that the G4600 was cheaper at the time of building this computer and recording this video. The Pentium and the Ryzen 3 are hands down the best budget CPUs that you can purchase right now, and the reason why I went with the Pentium instead of with the Ryzen 3 is simply because of price. It's about $20 cheaper, and we need to save as much money as we can in order to put more money into other components. Otherwise, it's a hyper-threaded dual core, so it acts similar to a quad core, and it's clocked at around 3.5 to 3.6 gigahertz depending on which variant of the Pentium that you purchase. Either way, they're going to perform identically, so just pick up the cheaper one. I paired the Pentium with the ASRock B250M HDV motherboard, and this motherboard I picked up for about $45, but honestly, just get the cheapest motherboard for this CPU. Now, if you want something with faster memory support, then pick up a B250 chipset motherboard like my ASRock here. The Gigabyte one is only about 40 bucks shipped, and that's the one that I have in the parts list right now, and I highly recommend that one. But in all honesty, any of them work fine. Just get the cheapest one that you can get. The video card that I chose is the $70 Gigabyte GT1030, which is a pretty awesome entry-level 1080p card that doesn't require any external power. So if power consumption is an issue for you, then this is the right choice. It's fantastic for esports titles, and it works pretty well for higher end AAA titles. You just have to optimize your settings a little bit. But for the price, it's unbeatable in a brand new market. I have a full-length review on my channel if you guys want to check out a little bit more about the GT1030, but I will also provide benchmarks in this video too, so stay tuned for that. And now the place in the build where I had to cut the most corners, and that is the RAM. As many of you know, RAM prices are sky high right now. And so in order to make this build around 300 bucks, I could only afford 4 gigabytes. If I went with 8 gigs of RAM instead of 4, I would have had to downgrade the CPU to a dual core instead of a hyper-threaded quad core in order to keep the build around $300. And in all honesty, a dual core is a higher limiting factor than 4 gigs of RAM. You can accommodate 4 gigs of RAM by increasing your virtual memory size and by closing a lot of applications, but a lot of games today just simply won't run on a dual core, so that's why I chose 4 gigs of RAM as opposed to 8. Like always, get the cheapest RAM that you can afford right now and upgrade later on. Right now, I believe the build has the cheapest one, which is about $40 to $45. I have to check, but that's pretty much the way to go. Now, the power supply that I chose is the EVGA 450BT, and if you guys have been on the channel, then this is a very common power supply that I use. I use it more than I actually want to say that I do, but because it's only 30 bucks and it's so cheap, it's hard to not pick up and use in super tight budget builds such as this one. It's 80 plus certified, has 450 watts. It's more than you need for this build, and it does give you some breathing room for future upgrades. For storage, I recommend going with the $20 500 gigabyte white label hard drives that you can find on eBay brand new. White label hard drives work just as well as your standard hard drives that you pick up from Amazon or from Newegg. The only real difference is that these have a shorter shorter warranty period. I believe this one is about a year. So if you want a little bit more security, then you can pay another $4, $5, $6 and you can pick up another 500 gigabyte hard drive from Newegg. I believe it's about $24 right now. 500 gigs is also a great starting point for an entry-level gaming computer. You won't be able to load a ton of heavier AAA titles such as your Witcher 3s or your Battlefield 1s, but you can play a lot of your Fortnites, a lot of your Overwatches, a lot of your esports titles and still be okay. Now the case that I use is the Roswell FBM01. I have used this case before and I believe it was about 20 bucks at the time. It's somewhere around 25 right now, but in the parts list, I have the cheaper version, the Roswell SRM01, which also has USB 3.0, so free upgrade. But either one of those cases work. In all honesty, just pick up a case that you can find for like 20 bucks on Amazon, Newegg, wherever that you like to shop, and it will work just fine. These cases have pretty poor cable management options. The best I could do was just stuff a lot of the cables in the drive bay and then kind of force my way with the 24-pin connector because it was so thick and I didn't have a lot of clearance in the back. But you just got to work with what you got. Fortunately enough, they do come with 2 fans. It comes with a 92mm fan right here in the rear and then a 120mm fan over there in the front. So at the time of recording this video, everything here is about $305. Now this build isn't exactly the build that I have in my parts list, but all of the components are essentially performing the same. They're just different brands, different names, stuff like that. And you got to be a little bit flexible at this budget simply because prices change all the time. So essentially we're just getting the cheapest prices or the cheapest products that we can, and that is going to change of course as time goes on. So just look for the cheapest GT1030, the cheapest G4560 or 4600, the cheapest compatible motherboard, and then about a $30 power supply, $35 power supply, and then a $20 case, and then you're pretty much set for a $300 computer as of December 2017, early January 2018. Anyway, the moment that a lot of you have probably been waiting for, and that is the benchmarks. How does this guy perform? And is it worth it? So let's check it out. So in Overwatch at 1080p using the medium preset, I capped the FPS at 60 just so I don't experience any large frame jumps. And that's a solid opportunity for me to say that if you don't want to experience a lot of frame jumps, then capping the FPS can definitely help. Anyway, it dipped into the mid or low 50s on occasion, but it still held up in large scale team fights and it was more than playable. Definitely an enjoyable experience. In the game Fortnite at 1080p using medium settings again, I averaged about 45 to 60 FPS the majority of the time with very few frame dips. It's very laggy in the lobby area right before you get onto the balloon, and it will lag the first few seconds after exiting the balloon, but that's because the textures and the files are being loaded, and of course you only have 4 gigs of RAM. Outside of that, it's very playable. Another fantastic esport title is Rainbow Six Siege. At 1080p using the medium preset, I averaged about 40 to 60 FPS with very consistent gameplay. It was probably one of the smoothest other than Overwatch, and I hardly noticed any frame dips whatsoever. So after trying a few lighter titles and an esport title, I decided to step it up a notch, starting off with Witcher 3. At the lowest settings at 1080p, I again capped the FPS at 30, and it was playable. FPS dips are inevitable, but it never froze, and it hovered around 30 FPS the majority of the time. Combat often dipped into the 28s and 29s, but riding through Novigrad went very well, even with all of the NPCs spawning everywhere. And for the most popular games out right now, PUBG was playable at 1080p using the lowest settings and lowering the internal resolution to 70. Now, similar to Fortnite, it definitely took some time to warm up. The first minute or two will lag and stutter, and that's completely normal. As you can see, PUBG will max out the RAM and page file usage for the first few minutes, and that's simply because it's loading everything into the game. But after that, it lowers down the usage to about 3 gigs in the RAM, and everything is playable after that. You will get frame dips, that's inevitable, but again, it's definitely playable. And just for the LOLs, I tried Battlefield 1 in a 64-player multiplayer match, 1080p using the lowest settings. Now, it took about 15 minutes, first of all, to enter the match, and RAM was maxed out the entire time. It was a stuttering mess. 4 gigs of RAM truly hits its limit here, and no amount of virtual RAM allocation can solve that at all. So Battlefield 1, unplayable. I can only imagine other games like Assassin's Creed Origins would be unplayable as well. Now, in case you are using a computer like this with only 4 gigs of RAM, here's one crucial tip that I recommend you do once you load Windows in, and that is you allocate more virtual memory. So go to your PC and then click on Properties and Advanced System Settings. Under the Advanced tab, you'll see Performance, and inside of that box, you'll see Settings, and inside of that, you'll see another Advanced tab. Click Adjust Performance for Programs and click Virtual Memory and change it. make sure that the box custom size is chosen, and make sure that your initial memory allocation is at least the amount of your recommended. I actually changed mine to 8 gigabytes, which is 8,192 megabytes, just to give more space for all of my games and all of my files. After that, click Set, OK, Apply, OK, and restart your computer. So that's the $300 entry-level gaming computer. Now, if you use the used market at all, you can probably get better value for the same price, but this does have a few things over the used market. So let's check them out. For one, it has great upgradability. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but you can upgrade this to an i5 or an i7 Kaby Lake or Skylake, and it will work just fine, which is awesome. And you can't say that about a lot of used components that you find on the market. On top of that, it has new features that a lot of used options do not have, such as the new storage device form factor M.2. Even budget options have that nowadays, so that's also pretty cool. And with the build as a whole, of course, there are downfalls. The biggest one is obviously the lack of RAM. With 4 gigs, you are going to be limited by a few games. So if you can spend the extra $40 and pick up an 8 gigabyte kit, I highly recommend doing that. It will make a big difference. So if you can do that, if you can't, it's not the end of the world. You just have to be very patient and accommodate a lot of your settings to match the components that you have at hand. But regardless, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I definitely had a ton of fun making it and seeing if I can build a computer of this nature and this stature. If you have any questions about the parts or the computer in general, then let me know in the comments below. All of the links for the parts are down in the description below, so click that. Thank you guys so much for watching again. Leave a like if you liked it, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Merry Christmas to you all, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.